The Rest Stop with Brad Restituto.
Comes up in the pocket, fires to the right side, caught by Diggs. Stay up! Oh my God! Oh my God! Touchdown! Are you kidding me? It's a Minneapolis Miracle!
I got 3 words for you. You like that?
Welcome to The Rest Stop, Tuesday, December 1st, 2020. Thanks for joining us. Come to you live every Tuesday and Thursday, 9 o'clock Pacific time. Myself, Brad the Believer, and Spencer the Wiz. And we got a good show for you in tune today as Week 12 of the NFL wrapped up or is wrapping up. We'll be finishing up tomorrow in Pittsburgh as a COVID breakout in the Ravens-Steelers matchup leaves that game postponed until tomorrow afternoon. So that'll wrap up Week 12 of the NFL action. College basketball is in full swing. College football still trying to hang on as they have a myriad of games being postponed and rescheduled, and they're trying to complete their season there as well. So the NFL playoff picture is wrapping up nicely, and we'll discuss that in the NFL. A couple teams trying to position themselves, other teams keeping others alive by falling this past Sunday. But before we get into the NFL and football talk, I want to talk about Saturday's fight action as some of the big action between Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr., huge pay-per-view numbers, and then, of course, former NBA star Nate Robinson and Jake Paul had a matchup also, and it didn't end very well for Nate Robinson as he was knocked out cold, I believe, in the first or second round, Spence. I think we both witnessed that fight. And it was unfortunate for Nate Robinson as he was the laughing stock of a lot of memes on the internet, but he faced it head on. He took it like a champ, but not a great showing for Nate Robinson in his first boxing match. Spence, you saw it as well as I did. What were your thoughts? Were you surprised about how it ended for Nate?
I wouldn't say like a champ. He looked awful out there. He ducked behind punches. He was constantly just kind of inside. I don't know if he even landed any. The way I felt about it is, look, he probably thought in his mind, and I remember I edited an interview you had with Nate, like right before he kind of accepted the fight. I don't think he had the right mindset going into it. He thought, I'm a professional NBA player, so hey, who knows? Probably I'll be able to take on Jake Paul. But the thing is, Jake isn't the greatest boxer of all time, but he does have a coherent strategy. He does clearly take it quite seriously, and he's had a bit of training at this point, and he was way in over his head. Honestly, the referee probably should have stopped it after the second time he got knocked down or almost knocked out, because it's dangerous at that point. People shouldn't be. Amateur boxing is not something you should dabble in by any stretch of the imagination. You should, if you're doing it, you got to take it seriously. You probably got to train for a year if you're going in cold turkey. Then once you get into a flow, okay, maybe you can fight every 3 months and still be okay. But he's lucky to not be seriously injured.
Yeah, it didn't end too well for him. And Spence, we are coming off our last Thursday show that we did live on Thanksgiving. So hopefully everybody's recovered from their Thanksgiving Day festivities as we are now in the last month of 2020, Spence. What do you think about this year coming to a close here in the next 30 days and then us starting fresh in 2021? Can you believe that this madness of 2020 is almost on the final lap here?
I get that. I get the sentiment that 2020 obviously hasn't been ideal, but I also think that's a fallacy, as if all the problems of 2020 are just going to dissipate as soon as January 1st rolls around. We're still going to have the same issues. And especially when we talk about these, I guess, the very least COVID, because that's kind of been the main idea of 2020. It's not going to go away once we start the new year. And for the vaccine, we're probably not going to get it until a few months in. So hopefully everyone kind of sheds their attitude. That's the only thing you can really hope for when it comes to 2021. But I'm graduating in 2 weeks, so I'm really happy about that. That's kind of my main thing. You gotta focus on what you can do now, and what I can do now is study for all these finals exams for like 8 hours a day and go from there.
Yeah, Spence, it's just kind of a domino that leads some of the problems from 2020 into 2021. We're not going to erase everything that happened, but look, back to the fight on Saturday. So Jake Paul didn't get all the credit in the world. It's not like he was continuously praised for his outing. He was, after he called out Conor McGregor and some other elite level fighters on whatever level, This is his brother, Logan Paul, who was called out by Jose Canseco, calling out Logan Paul for a fight. Logan Paul, the ex-boyfriend of Jose Canseco's daughter, Josie Canseco. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of her, Spence. She's not bad looking, I should say. Definitely quite the looker. And Logan Paul had a great response. No problem. I love smashing Canseco. So that's probably the quote of the day from Logan Paul, brother of Jake Paul, who finished Nate Robinson in a exhibition type fight on Saturday. It wasn't much of an exhibition for Nate, as he was floored, completely knocked out cold. And then the main event, Roy Jones Jr., Mike Tyson, 250-plus-year-olds getting in the ring. That fight was ruled a draw. Spence, a lot of people seemed fairly pleased with seeing the fight between the two 50-year-olds. They were glad to see Tyson back in the ring. It definitely did pretty well in the pay-per-view numbers up to this point. What were your thoughts on the whole thing? And did you talk to anybody who's a nostalgic 80s, 90s boxing fan, Tyson fans, that were happy to see him back in the ring?
I watched it with my dad, and I don't know. I mean, what can you expect to see out of two 50-year-old guys? Although I heard of another famous boxer called up Mike Tyson. If I can find it, I will bring that up. But it was okay. I mean, Roy clearly was not in greatest shape as Mike Tyson was. Mike Tyson looked like he wanted to box around a lot more. He seemed a lot less tired. Although when they got to the 7th and 8th rounds, sure, he looked a little gassed. But I feel like he does. I do expect to see Mike Tyson back in the ring at least one more time.
Well, he did say he was quite high before the fight. So some of the Tyson Ranch products are helping Mike get through each and every day. Dave Perry checks in and says it was like two old men fighting at the Moose Lodge. Yeah, I guess something like that. Look, I thought they both did okay. Definitely Roy Jones Jr. looks like a complete opposite of himself back in his heyday. Mike Tyson has always been a heavyweight. Roy Jones Jr. started off at a smaller, sleeker size. So definitely Roy Jones, the last few fights he was in were well past his prime, and he found the face of the canvas in a few of those fights. So I don't think Mike was going to go too hard on him. But I think a lot of the fans got what they wanted. They wanted to see Mike Tyson back in the ring. They were able to see that. They were able to see some good undercards. I was able to see Badu Jack fight a former Army. I think he was an Army special ops individual that had some cruiserweight fights under his belt. Badu Jack, a former champion, and Badu Jack pounded this guy pretty good. But this guy showed an impressive chin, Spence, as he took each and every one of the punches, and I think he lasted the entire 8 rounds, which was kind of impressive to me. Did you see any other fights besides the Paul Robinson fight yourself?
Yeah, the names are slipping my mind, but I would say all of them were actually pretty entertaining. The 2 or 3 fights before the main event, it was just 2 kind of like small guys going at it. They had a lot of heart, and so that's kind of what you like to see out of boxing for the most part. They look like they're a little more polished than you would see in the Jake Paul fight. But I don't know. I mean, it was good. It was a decent event for what it was. They had a few communication issues and broadcast issues, but no, I like to see events like that, especially it seemed like Mike Tyson was trying to give back. I don't know where all the money went, but if they're able to do something like that and do something good out of it, I would say it was a big success.
Yeah, and a lot of the big talk on social media, Spence, was Snoop Dogg doing the announcing of the Jones-Tyson fight. He apparently was the man of the hour in popularity after commentary by that. Did you have any thoughts on that? I don't know that I heard too much of it. I was trying to get my computer from not freezing continuously, so I didn't really keen in too much on what Snoop Dogg was up to, but he definitely was very popular after that fight.
No, he's Snoop Dogg, so you really know what you're going to get out of him. Although the funny part is his performance seemed to go on a little too long. It was almost like he's putting on a concert, and I was like, I kind of just want to see the fight because they were already like an hour behind schedule. So at that point, I was trying to balance it between the UFC fight because I wanted to see the main event, but I also obviously wanted to see Mike Tyson fight. So it was okay. I mean, he's funny, so I liked it.
Spence, let's transition to I believe we're week 12 in the NFL. We've got, I think, roughly 5 games left in the regular season, it seems like to me. And that'll wrap up tomorrow in Pittsburgh as the COVID-riddled Baltimore Ravens will be asked to take the field tomorrow in Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers, and it's been quite the interesting 10 to 14 days for the Ravens, as it seemed to have started off with the strength and conditioning coach, trickled down to the running backs, all the way through to the starting quarterback, and now we've got between 12 and 16 guys that would typically see playing time for the Ravens not in the lineup. It looks like the Ravens may get back running backs Mark Ingram, and J.K. Dobbins, but man, this is wild for the Ravens. They really haven't had much practice time. Let's just talk about the game for a second, Spence. What chance do the Ravens have fielding this team? I mean, we see the Titans field a team on short week notice, and they blew out the Buffalo Bills probably about 5 weeks ago. What are the Ravens' chance here in this game?
I mean, Robert Griffin III is an NFL quarterback. They're not starting a receiver from the practice squad, so that bodes well for them. But unfortunately, they are playing one of the best defenses in the league. That does not bode well for them. You got Mark Ingram back. You got J.K., so you have some weapons that are going to be available for the game. But this is to close down your facility, open it back up, close it again. You're asking a lot of a team, and when unprepared teams go into football games like you saw at the Raiders game, we'll talk about in a little bit, you're going to get absolutely dominated. So it sucks, but the NFL is not going to cancel this game no matter what, unless there's like a very serious medical issue. Because if you let the Broncos team have a practice squad guy come out and throw more interceptions and completions, you're not going to cancel this game at all. It's just weird. We're going to have Tuesday football because the NFL is so stubborn, and they won't just expand the NFL season an additional week, or go to their contingency plan, which they had all along, which is to add an extra wild card spot.
It's now Wednesday, Spence. Wednesday game tomorrow between the Ravens and the Steelers. And we will talk about that Saints-Broncos matchup here a little bit later. I'd really like to see RG3 have a comeback party in this game, of course, because I got a little wager on the Ravens that I put in before all this news came down. But even if I didn't, I'm not the biggest fan of the Steelers. I would like to see RG3 really run to perfection that read option game, and I'd like to see him utilize his legs for over 100 yards, make some throws, and really kind of morph into RG3 of his rookie year, where he was rookie of the year. I don't know if he's got that left in the tank, but I'm sure he definitely feels like he's got a lot to prove, and this will be his first meaningful, significant NFL action in probably close to 6 or 7 years. So I'll be interested to see that dynamic. I just don't know. I'm not a big believer in the Steelers' offense, Spence. I know that they've got really good receivers. I don't think they can run the ball. I don't think Ben can move around like he used to right now. And I think the Ravens, even shorthanded, have a chance to stay in this game. But we'll see. It'll be an early afternoon kickoff, so we'll follow that one closely. And I'll be very happy come Tuesday show if the Ravens find a way to win. Spence, let's briefly recap last night's Monday Night Football action. The Seattle Seahawks, they traveled to Philly to take on the Eagles, and the Eagles, which have every opportunity to try to position themselves in this NFC East, which is very winnable. They get beat by the Seattle Seahawks and Russell Wilson. DK Metcalf over 10 receptions. He goes off again. And a late run by the Eagles. Did you see this last play? I heard there was a Hail Mary. I didn't quite see it, Spence. If you can tell me what you saw, if you were able to see it or what you heard about it.
I did not see that. So there was a point in the game where I just kind of tuned out because it wasn't close. The Eagles really weren't even putting a good performance on the field. Carson Wentz continually looks worse. It's always like a combination for the Eagles too. It's like Carson will have a bad throw so they don't catch it. Well, then he'll throw a good throw and they'll drop the ball. Or it looks like a receiver's open and he'll get sacked. So there's nothing coherent going on this team. No one's on the same page. I don't know who to put the blame on. I guess the first thing you got to do is you got to shore up your offensive line, because if you look long term, okay, you get rid of Carson Wentz, but that's still a huge problem. What happened to Joe Burrow this year? Well, because they didn't invest in the offensive line, he tore his ACL. So a new quarterback isn't going to fix the Eagles' issues. And the thing that's kind of sad is they have a decent enough defense, maybe like middle of the pack, but that's okay. I think you can ride with that in the NFL if you can get it together on the other side, where it just looks like there's too many holes for them to do anything when it should be an easy year for them to win this division.
Yeah, Spence, I'm not going to speculate on what the Eagles were thinking or what their plan was drafting Jalen Hurts in the second round, but I think at this point in the season, even though Carson Wentz isn't his best, and I still think he's a good football player, he's just not having a good year, I do think there's no harm at this point and seeing what kind of momentum you could build with Jalen Hurts playing a full game. Is he ready for that? I don't know. He definitely is a run-first guy at this point in his career, but I think he's got the ability to throw the football, and I'd like to see what kind of spark he would give the Eagles if he were inserted in the starting lineup full-time for the short term. I think that would be good for the Eagles. I think that'd be good for the fan base. And what do they got to lose at this point? I mean, they're in a division that's still winnable, but they're not doing anything to position themselves to win anything. Seattle, we know we've questioned their defense. They went for a few fourth downs in the first half, Spence, that they got stuffed on. And you mentioned that Eagles defense, they came up big in that first half, but it wasn't enough. They had many opportunities to build that momentum. Their offense just could not get it going. And Seattle ended up being too much offensively, and they just couldn't score in the first half, Spence. The Eagles had opportunity after opportunity and could not convert on those opportunities. Seattle looks like the team that should win the NFC West. I mean, look, we've talked about from one week to the next, the Rams. They look great one week. They lose the next week. They're one of the most inconsistent teams in the entire NFL. I don't know that I can trust them to win that division. Seattle certainly is more consistent from week to week. And with Jared Goff leading your franchise, I just think that's going to lead to inconsistency as the Rams show week in and week out that they're not consistent enough to be taken seriously. I know that Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers may have their number, but that's not a game you should go out and lose. And so for that reason, I believe Seattle is the team that should win that division in the NFC West. Spence, let's with our pick segment in week 12, we did okay. We didn't blow anything out of the water. I believe since we're going to take out the Saints-Broncos game, we'll do a push there. Ended up being 6-6. I think you won 4 games this past week. We started off the slate slow. Both of us, our first 3 games were losers. That first one was Raiders-Falcons, Spence. I'm going to let you take the wheel on this one because this one disappointed everybody. I put in one of those mega teaser tickets, Spence, and I had every game on my ticket right except the Raiders, mine plus 6.5. So if they somehow cover that plus 6.5, I probably cashed $500-600. That was my only loss. Almost every other side hit for the most part, unless you took the Broncos and maybe 1 or 2 others. But man, it was definitely a week if you're playing those teasers. But the Raiders are the ones that took us down. You mentioned in the pick segment last week that in your gut you thought the Falcons would blow out the Raiders. That was what happened. They got absolutely destroyed. Their worst performance of the season, disappointing in every facet, from quarterback to defense to coaching, which I didn't think I would see. To get thoroughly outcoached by the Atlanta Falcons at this point in the season when you're playing for everything is not acceptable. Derek Carr, we've been seeing his praises lately, had his worst game of the season. Spence, how do you explain it away? I know you're not surprised by this, but go ahead and get into detail about your thoughts on the Raiders and what their outlook is for the rest of the season.
Yeah, so the Raiders basically are who I thought they were, which is a bottom-feeding team. I said they were the 6th worst team coming into the season. They might be like the 10th worst team. All right. I thought they were going to win 6 wins this season. They'll probably get to 7 or 8. Big whoop. Still have one of the worst defenses in the NFL. That's baseline. I mean, there's no talent, no Pro Bowl talent. You got Max Crosby, who is probably the best player, a 4th-round pick out of Eastern Michigan. Other than that, nothing really going for you. Derek Carr is back to who I thought he was. Again, this is what I'll say about Derek Carr, and I've been thinking about this a lot. Everyone said he was great. Obviously, he's not. He's not a great quarterback. He never will be. He's just okay. So to expect him to win you a football game is never going to happen. So I expect this to keep going downwards. I think the Raiders are going to lose to the Jets, and that'll kind of be the final straw. They'll probably end up winning the last game against the Broncos just because, to go 8-8 and to ruin their draft position. But this team needs a lot of help. You're not going anywhere anytime soon. I don't know where everyone thought they were going to make the playoffs this year. They're obviously going to fall off here. They're going to lose to the Colts. They're going to lose to the Dolphins for sure. So the best case scenario is 8 wins in my mind. I don't know. It's just... I guess the disappointing part is I knew they weren't going to make the playoffs, and then they tricked everyone into thinking they were. So it feels a little extra worse when they play down to where I knew they were from the start of the season.
Spence, give me some more detail about this game in particular against the Falcons. It seemed like they were forcing Atlanta to kick field goals early in the game. If I believe you watched the whole game, I only saw bits and pieces. Spence, tell me what happened offensively early in the game with the Raiders. Could they not establish the run? What was happening in the play action? Why could they not manufacture enough yards to get points on the board in that first half?
Yeah, Pro Football Focus loves Derek Carr, right? Because he seems to never throw interceptions, but they forget one vital thing. It's that he has negative pocket awareness, meaning he's good for 2 fumbles on any given game. This guy has no idea what's going on around him. He assumes way too much, and it gets caught. I think he had 2 fumbles for himself, and you'll see throughout the season, even this season too, the guy just doesn't know. He doesn't look left or right. He doesn't know if the pocket's collapsing, so he gets caught like that. And then now Josh Jacobs seems to have the fumble bug. The receivers seem to have the fumble bug. It's a lack of discipline. I just knew it was going to be like this. So it's not as harsh on me as it is for all the people who hyped up the Raiders this season. You don't expect to see the fumbles from Josh Jacobs going in the future. He hasn't had that problem in college or in the professionals. I absolutely 100% expect Derek Carr to fumble the ball every single week, though.
Spence, you know I'm on Jets countdown watch as I have a 0-16 ticket for the Jets at plus money that I am looking forward to hopefully cashing. I see the only really game for the Jets to win on the schedule is their finale against the Patriots in Foxborough. After you were so furious this past Sunday with your Raiders, you were telling me the Jets will win this game against the Raiders.
Yeah, they are.
Yes, Spence, you're still standing by that.
Yeah, I told you we're going to see Marcus Mariota this season. I thought it would be against the Chargers, but once they lose this game and once they're out of playoff contention, they'll see Marcus Mariota, maybe not to replace Derek Carr, but to see what they got in their backup quarterback because they have the option to pick him up next season, and they'll definitely want to know if they got any value out of the guy.
Well, so tell me how you see this happening. You said Josh Jacobs had some uncharacteristic fumbles against Atlanta. Yep. Don't you think he would want to redeem himself against the 0-11 Jets? And John Gruden's got to be already very upset about the fact that they let this game slip away against Atlanta. How would he feel if they started off the season the way they did, beating the Chiefs, beating the Saints, and then they lose to the 0-11 Jets? That won't be good for the papers here in Las Vegas. That won't be good for that Raiders locker room. Suspense, you got to sell me a little more on the Jets getting the outright win, their first win of the week this coming Sunday against the Raiders.
No, the first of all, Henry Ruggs is a garbage receiver. He's worse than Jacoby Ford. I was worried he was going to be Jacoby Ford, but he's worse. The guy can't run routes. He can't catch the football. I know he had one good catch, but one good catch for the whole season. That's so great. Watching Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb burn defenses all over the league. So that's going to come back and burn them in this game. Nelson Aguilar also seems to be right back in the drop bug. And then that's on them. That on the newspapers and stuff, that's on them. I knew this team wasn't that good, but they tried to sell the team to everybody else in the city of Las Vegas. I wasn't fooled. And it's just Derek Carr's probably going to be good for a couple fumbles. Just like he was. I said he would fumble through the back of the end zone. I still think he's going to do that this season. I was hoping someone would take that prop bet for me at the casinos, but I haven't seen that just yet. And the Raiders just are going to disappoint everyone once again.
Well, Spence, I haven't been on your side here up to this point, but you do look like your prognostications could be steering in the right direction with this terrible performance this past Sunday. Like Victor said, though, maybe it's just one game. We'll have to wait and see. If Spencer's predictions continue to come true and the Jets get their first win, not only will Spence be on the Raiders' dogging wagon, the believer will join at the head of the ship because I'll be furious if the Jets get their first win against the Raiders with me sitting with an 0-16 Jets ticket in my pocket. So I'll be watching that one closely, Spencer. I hope that's not the case. I know the Raiders hope that's not the case. The Jets, man, we'll talk about them here in a little bit, but let's move on to Cardinals, Patriots, and Foxborough. I blame this loss on Cliff Kingsbury, Spence. There was many. I'm all for aggression. I love aggression as a head football coach on 4th and short, on 4th down. But there's a lot of times, Spence, that sometimes you just have to take the points. I thought there was 2, 3, maybe 4 occasions where Kingsbury could have took points. He did not. It cost him his team points. They end up losing the game by 3. They missed a field goal, but a bunch of those field goals they could have kicked earlier could have secured them the victory. Like I said, I don't mind being aggressive. I like being somewhat aggressive, but I think there are times you got to take points. Kingsbury and a couple other coaches refused to take that philosophy whatsoever. Cost the Cardinals here, and it's an important game for the Cardinals. They're trying to position themselves for one of those wild card spots in the NFC, and this is a bad loss for them. With the Vikings winning, they're only a game behind them. In the win column, a couple other teams not too far behind. Not a good loss for the Cardinals here against the Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the Cardinals all year, and you just don't know if you're going to get out of them from week to week. I agree with you. You got to take points when you can. Now, you shouldn't go as far to take it as John Gruden, your team down 7, you take a field goal, it does nothing for you. We're not talking about that here. Points are a premium in the NFL, so if it positions you to be within one score, okay, that's different. If it positions you to go up 3, that's different. But to think that, oh, it's 4th and 1 and we're on the goal line, I have to go for it, is a complete fallacy. And this is just, the Cardinals are just not ready. I said that if they make the playoffs, they're going to get bounced in the first round. I still feel that way. They're just undisciplined, and I like their head coach like overall, but he's got to learn to develop as a coach. I think that comes along with years of experience.
I agree with you, Spence. Of course, you would love to have a touchdown going into halftime, but you'd rather have some points going into halftime than no points. And the difference in momentum between kicking a field goal and leaving with 3 points and then getting stopped on a 4th and 1 and having no points and giving the other team that much more momentum, I think is really big. And I think Kingsbury made quite a few errors in that game, not taking points. It ended up costing them. We mentioned the inconsistency of the Cardinals. They just can't seem to find it, Spence. They're not ready. Like you said, I think you said it very well. And if they do find a way to make it to the playoffs, I don't think they'll last very long. Next game, Spence, the Giants, who seem to be red hot right now, they got a win against the Bengals. They did not get the cover. They probably should have covered, as they were up by more than 6 points most of that game. They let a backdoor touchdown by Brandon Allen, and the Bengals ruined those covering chances. And some more sad news for Giants fans is Daniel Jones, their starting quarterback, had a hamstring injury and had to leave that game. Colt McCoy came in to replace him, didn't do much, but it looks like Daniel Jones could be missing in action for the Giants for the next couple of weeks. And this could be something that affects their chances of winning that division. A big loss for the Giants. Nice win. I believe they've won 4 in a row, something along those lines. So Giants fans have to be happy about that, but not happy about the fact that Daniel Jones may miss some time with a hamstring injury.
Yeah, I guess this is one of the games where we all just kind of fooled ourselves into thinking that they're ready to take the next step forward and be like a good team. They're okay, and I think they just look great because they're in such a bad division, and we're kind of like, oh, maybe they're going to start stringing some wins together. They're just a decent football team. Really, they should have beat the Bengals by more than that, and I guess that's just football. Backdoor touchdowns are going to happen. Derek Carr is the king of garbage time touchdowns, and we just know they happen every week, and you just got to take it for what it is.
The next matchup, the Cleveland Browns, who have a very nice record. I believe they're 8-3, travel to Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars. I was right on this one. Finally got on the winning track, taking Jacksonville, but I seem to be right about Cleveland finding ways to win, but maybe not being as strong as their record, as it was a Mike Glennon 2-point conversion away from being tied, and the Browns find a way to win as they beat Jacksonville. What are your thoughts on the Cleveland Browns, Spence?
Yeah, I guess I'm just a little short-sighted, and I saw that they were able to kind of beat up a team in the Eagles, and I thought they'd be able to do that going forward. I don't know. The other thing is that Jacksonville always seems to be close in games, but just never win, which is, I guess, what you want out of a fan. Like as a fan, you probably want to see that. I mean, Nick Chubb is just one of the best running backs in the league, and I think that goes underappreciated. They have a chance to establish, like any team that can establish a run and be successful at it against anybody has a chance to do something. I think they could win a couple playoff games. I don't see them winning the Super Bowl, obviously, because you mostly need a good quarterback to do that, and Baker Mayfield's just not. So if they had a great quarterback, I would be so high on this team because they seem to have a bit of togetherness, a bit of a coherent strategy, and it almost seems like losing Odell, losing that personality, has kind of helped them kind of have a better game plan instead of trying to force the ball to him. I don't know how you feel about that. So I don't know. It just seems like they always get these unfavorable lines that just they can't live up to.
Spence, I will say one thing I like about my Jets 0-16 ticket. Every team they play from here on out still feel like they're playing for playoff aspirations. The Raiders, who as they sit coming into Sunday, are still very much alive. So that's a team looking for a playoff berth. The Browns will be definitely trying to position themselves for the playoffs, who the Jets face, the Rams. And then I believe it's Seattle and then the Patriots. So I'm hoping all those teams certainly have something to play for. The Jets do not. I'm hoping that moves in my favor. As hard as I've been on the Browns, if they lose and give the Jets their first win of the season, I will be absolutely furious. I'll never forgive them, and I'll lose my mind on the show. So hopefully the Browns will take care of business against the Jets, and hopefully the other 5 teams that face the Jets this year will beat them as well as the Jets. I mean, they can't beat anybody, and certainly the teams they play the rest of the way out are as good as the teams that have beat the Jets the last couple weeks, with the Chargers, who have won 2 games, and then the Dolphins, who only scored 20 points. So we'll continue to follow the Jets watch as I've got 5 games left, Spence. It's the Raiders, the Browns, Seahawks, Rams, and Patriots to complete the 0-16 ticket for the New York Jets. Next game on our list, the Carolina Panthers. We were both on the right side, +4 against the Vikings. The Panthers should have won that game if it weren't for bad clock management by the Panthers down the stretch. And they still, even though with bad clock management, had a chance at the buzzer to kick a 54-yard field goal to win. It sailed to the left. The Vikings get a comeback win from Kirk Cousins. The Kirk Cousins fanboys are out in full effect as they're all over the internet, just pounding his stats on the table, talking about his comeback efforts, and basically crowning Kirk Cousins as the best Vikings quarterback since Dante Culpepper. And you can crown him all you want. They're a 5-win football team, Spence. Kirk Cousins isn't fooling anybody to think he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback. I will say he has some very nice plays on Sunday against the Panthers. I think he's made some progress in some of his abilities to move within the pocket, and I give him a lot of credit for that. There's just not enough consistency, Spence. We would have to see a Kirk Cousins like we did on that last drive and like during parts of the game for 7, 8, 9 straight weeks, which we have not done. That being said, you're not going to have me trust a Vikings team to make some noise. And this is a game, quite frankly, they should have lost. There was 2 big turnovers back-to-back, a fumble by Cousins, fumble by Cook, led to defensive touchdowns by the Panthers. And the Panthers pulled away from that game. I'm really not sure how the Vikings managed their way back in it. Like I said, a lot of clock management errors by Matt Rule, Teddy Bridgewater, and the Panthers cost them that game. The Vikings locker room and the Vikings diehards are happy about that win. I don't know that it does too much for them except give the players within that locker room confidence. They win by 1 point. Heartbreaking loss in a way for the Panthers.
Yeah, and the real reason I took this because we've talked about this every week, and the Panthers are a competitive football team. They're going to find a way to be in. So if you can get something more than a field goal out of them, not against every single buddy, you would almost think like, oh, the Chiefs, you wouldn't take that, but they almost beat the Chiefs. So.
And the Chiefs are the worst team against the spread in the NFL this year, pretty much. So.
Yeah, I mean, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, you can almost pick any team, and they were kind of right there. You don't expect them to win, but they can usually keep within a field goal. That's really just the philosophy I had going into it, and I thought they were going to win the game. But Kirk Cousins, had a little bit of heroics. We'll see if he can do it again and get the Vikings a couple more wins by the end of the season.
Well, they played a 1-10, and I believe are they 1-11 now? The Jaguars, I think they're still 1-10. The Jaguars, the Vikings will play them for their 3rd straight home game in US Bank Stadium. I expect that number is higher than a touchdown. I'll be on Jacksonville. The Vikings are going to struggle in this game, Spence. I'm telling you right now, teams they should beat. Let's be honest. We talked about this 3-game stretch. They should have lost 2 in a row. They lost to the Cowboys, and they should have lost to Carolina. And they're going to be in a dogfight against Jacksonville. It's unfortunate. Because this Vikings team likes to tease people into thinking that they're better than they are. They're not. I see some improvement in some areas, but not enough to do anything that warrants a playoff spot or a winning record. So we'll see how it shapes up. I honestly think the Vikings should have been positioning themselves for a draft pick, but they'll probably ride with Kirk Cousins again next year, and we'll see what happens on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe they'll have Danielle Hunter back, Michael Pierce back from COVID, a healthy Anthony Barr, but I don't know. I'm not too optimistic for the Vikings' short-term future at this point.
It's just funny to hear us talk about our favorite teams and just how drastically different we're so like doom and gloom. But after the Vikings win, you sound so bummed out.
Well, I'm a former Vikings fan, so
I know you still love them in your heart. My dad going into the season said, "I hate the Raiders. I'm not watching football anymore." I know damn well he watches them just as closely as I do.
Well, can you imagine if I had 500 on the Panthers money line and the way that the Panthers gave away that game? I would have broke everything that operates in this household if that would have been the case. Luckily, I did not. And that didn't happen. It was the Raiders that bit me this past weekend. So we're on the same page there. Spence, for first place in the division in the AFC North, the Titans took on the Colts this past Sunday. And the Titans pretty much led wire to wire and it was the Derrick Henry show for the Tennessee Titans. Spence, I think you called this one. I believe you said the Titans would win in impressive fashion, and they certainly did so.
Yeah, it's just when you have two really good teams, and we've seen this kind of with the Ravens and Steelers throughout the last few years, it's so tough to just beat them twice in the same season. These are two teams who are obviously going to be in the playoffs, who are very competitive football teams. It's going to happen. They're going to be so hyped. They're not, because going into the playoffs, you have the potential to face each other when you both know you're going to be there. You don't want to go in looking that bad. And they were super charged up. Derrick Henry obviously is next level, and they just rode with it.
Yeah, nice win for the Titans. And Spence, I think you've talked for a couple of weeks about maybe the Titans finally getting their groove. I know they had a disappointing performance in the middle of that somewhere, but they've had a few nice wins here as of late. And this kind of puts them clearly in first place in their division, hopefully to run away with it from this point forward, as it's a two-team race for that AFC South between the Tennessee Titans and the Indianapolis Colts. Next round of game, Spence, Buffalo Bills. They were at home against, it's all right. Buffalo Bills were at home against the Chargers. I believe Buffalo was a 5.5-point favorite in that game. And the Bills ended up getting the cover, but if it weren't for kind of last-minute back-and-forth turnovers by both teams, the Bills get the win. Josh Allen puts the Bills in nice position in the AFC East, clearly in first place, leading that Bills team. The Chargers, man, Anthony Lynn is just a matter of a time before he's out as the coach of the Chargers, as the Chargers have 3 wins on the season. Another disappointing loss. Justin Herbert looks to be a really solid rookie quarterback, and I don't think there's any reason why someone of his talent and the talent around him should have 3 wins. Nice win for the Bills, but Chargers continue to find ways to lose, Spence.
They sure do. And I think they're going along the philosophy of not firing Lynn because they don't want more wins at the end of the season. I think they're kind of pseudo-tanking by having a bad coach in. They're looking to put more talent around Justin Herbert because they knew they're not going for a Super Bowl run this year, right? So really they're just playing for pride. And the Bills, of course, I talked about, they take advantage of bad defenses. Sometimes they struggle against the better teams. But anytime you play Swiss cheese, they're gonna slice it up.
Yeah, Spence. And speaking of bad head coaches, the Detroit Lions made a move after their Thanksgiving Day loss to the Houston Texans. Matt Patricia and I believe is it Bob Quinn, the general manager? They are both finally out. And we've talked about it for weeks that this was long overdue. The Lions, they make a move. Patricia out, GM out. I expect this to give a boost to the Lions here in their next game, and I expect them to have one of those game after coach firings and them to win in impressive fashion. If you were hoping as a Lions fan to position yourself for a draft pick, this may be the move you didn't want to see. Matt Patricia out as Lions head coach. Do we know who the interim coach is for the Lions, why Patricia's out? We'll find that out. Spence, the next game we got on the list, why we looked that up, the New York Jets were at home in an AFC East matchup against the Dolphins. Ryan Fitzpatrick got the start for the Dolphins. They were a touchdown favorite in that game. The Jets got off to a 3-0 lead after they scored a field goal on their first drive, and then they didn't score from that point forward. Spence, did you find out the interim coach of the Detroit Lions, Matt Patricia, out?
Hold on, I'm almost there.
That's all right. Spence still trying to find that, but the Jets, they scored first in that game against the Dolphins. They could do nothing after that. And the Dolphins, they weren't that impressive, but they get the win and they get the easy cover, 20-3. And like I mentioned earlier, we are on Jets 0-16 watch. I thought this could be an opportunity for them at home to maybe steal one. They didn't do it, even though Sam Darnold was back in the starting lineup and had his full complement of receivers at his disposal. It did not matter. The Jets are the Jets, and I'm loving every minute of it, Spence.
Okay, so the coach is Darrell Bevell. He's the interim coach for the Lions.
He's former coordinator of the Seattle Seahawks and former offensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings.
So that is that. When it comes to the Jets, Sam Darnold's time's over in New York. I'm very excited to see where he goes next. I think he does have talent. I think it's the New York environment that has just kind of ruined his career. Hopefully it's not as severe. I can't even think of his name. That's how obscure he is now. But he was drafted high by the Cardinals. Ended up going to the Dolphins. You know what I'm talking about?
Josh Rosen.
Hopefully he doesn't become a next Josh Rosen. I think he has more talent than Josh. Although we will never know what we could have seen out of him because he just went to two of the worst teams in football at the time. So there are teams that are looking to replace young quarterbacks. We know Big Ben is getting ready to retire. That could be a potential place we see him, and he kind of just steps in and takes over the offense, and I think that'd be really good for them. But clearly the Jets are going to Trevor Lawrence this offseason, and they're probably going to ruin him too because unless they have a major offseason and they invest heavy in the offensive line and the receiver core, but they just have so much problems. You almost think that they should trade away the first pick for a bunch of assets, fix the rest of their team, and then get their franchise quarterback. I don't know.
Spence, I like the news that you broke there. I think the Steelers would be a great fit for Sam Darnold, and I think that could really jumpstart his career, and I think it'd be great for the Steelers franchise. Moving on from Ben Roethlisberger, as we don't know that they'll do that this next year, but definitely in the near future, they'll be looking to have a replacement for Ben Roethlisberger. Spence, let's put up another set of games that we have on the list. We'll go with what we have on the board there. I know we're missing a few. We'll hit those two. The Rams. The Rams took on the 49ers. I don't know how I was able to figure this one out. I should have dug deeper into knowing how Kyle Shanahan really owns Sean McVay. But we talk about it, Spence, and my analysis was right. These divisional games between the NFC West are always so close. And it was close again here in this matchup, and the Rams could not cover that 7-point spread. Nick Mullins, quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, not only do they get the cover, they get the outright win.
Yeah, the Rams are – I don't know. You could say it's inconsistency, but we've seen what weird divisional games. The Raiders beat the Chiefs. Obviously, they had no business doing that at all. Given any other circumstances, they probably wouldn't do that. So it's always a case. And in this division, I think especially is where you're going to see the closest games. I kind of fell into the trap. I just felt like the Rams were on their way to win the NFC and represent them in the Super Bowl. I just don't know if I feel that way anymore. But then you go down the list, and if we're going to talk about the playoffs, who is that consistent in the NFC? I mean, the AFC is a totally different story. So they have to bounce back next week, or there's some real questions they're going to have to start being asked.
Yeah, they're going to have to ask those questions, Spence, because unacceptable loss and too inconsistent for the Rams to make anybody a believer that they're going to win the entire NFC. This next one really got me, Spence. I did have a ticket with Chiefs -3, which was a push, but they dominated this game from start to finish. They're up 3 scores most of the game, and for them to find a way to only win by 3 is really kind of disgusting. As over 200 yards receiving by Tyreek Hill in the first quarter, Patrick Mahomes had his way, and then they somehow let the slithering Bucs worm their way back in to only winning by 3. How the hell did that happen, Spencer the Wiz?
Well, the Chiefs just have a very below average defense. They got to be bottom 5 statistically, I would imagine, giving a bunch of yards to the Raiders, and now the Buccaneers are finding a way to storm back. It's just they don't lose, so they should win the Super Bowl again, but for some reason, I just feel like they're going to have a bad game where they're not going so good offensively. The other team is going to take advantage of them on the defensive side. Again, I said this. I think the Ravens can actually beat the Chiefs. I know they didn't have a good showing in the regular season, but we know the playoffs are a totally different ballgame.
Spence, so give me 2 teams that you think can knock off the Chiefs in the playoffs. Do you think the Ravens are one?
I think the Ravens are one, and I think the Steelers could be the other one. If they're able to limit them. Well, I know you probably don't agree with that assessment, but that's how I feel about it.
Well, I told you what's going to happen to the Steelers, so you already know that. I don't have to remind you.
The Titans, too. I'll say that. I think the Titans.
The Titans are a team that can really surprise a lot of people, and they were 1 game away from being in the Super Bowl last year, and they may be able to take that step forward and get there this year, depending on how the dominoes fall around the NFL and the AFC. Spence, the Sunday night game, the Chicago Bears traveled to Lambeau Field to take on the Packers. Man, this is a dominant performance by the Packers from start to finish. I thought I saw glimpses from Trubisky that he looked good. And then right before I was kind of clapping my hands for him, he made a bonehead play. And the Bears were never really in this one. I was far off on this one. And the Packers, they probably should have won by more than 16, but they ended up winning, I believe, 41-25.
Trubisky is just a pile of garbage. He's so bad. It's so funny to watch him play football, and you could just tell that the sideline for the Bears and their coach just looks so disappointed, probably knowing that they had this great game plan against the below average defense, especially when it comes to running the ball, and they just can't get anything done because you can just load the box when Trubisky's in because he's not going to complete anything down deep. I don't. The Bears could be a playoff team right now this year if they had Jared Goff. That's how I feel about it. But because their quarterback play is so bad, they don't have a chance to win basically any game. And then they had this weird wins in the beginning of the season, but we're seeing their true Bears now.
Spence, I don't know why. I still see enough glimpses in Trubisky where I'm not ready to throw in the towel on him. I know I'm the crazy one right now, but I still have faith in Mitch. But Spence, I want to get to the Saints-Broncos game as the Broncos quarterback room had an outbreak of COVID, and they ended up starting a practice squad receiver at quarterback, and they completed no passes in that game. Spence, am I crazy to think that I could go out and complete three scripted passes in an NFL game? Or, I mean, what's going on here?
Well, it's just, I think it's a thing of the circumstances. Like, I had a day to read the playbook before the game. This is a person who had not been with the offense at all. I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than we would like to think. It does seem a little weird. And I will say what I thought was funny is one of the interceptions I saw, especially the guy was like taking a deep shot down the field. You would think they would try to contain it maybe to a few slants. But at the other side of things, the Saints probably planned for that, and they were playing heavy in the middle. It's just, what do you expect out of this game? The NFL really looks pretty bad, in my opinion, for having this happen.
I saw some of the lines, Spence, getting to minus 16 for the Saints. What were your thoughts on the spread? Did you think that it didn't matter what the number was, that the Saints could cover once that news came down? What were your thoughts on that high number booking that game?
Yeah, it's different, right? If you have your third string quarterback in, you're not like Gilbert, example for the Cowboys. This is a guy who, had been in the XFL, but at least he was a quarterback. When you don't have a quarterback in, you're not playing football for the most part. This isn't high school ball where you can run wildcat the entire game and expect it to work, especially with the Saints defense that's gaining a lot of momentum going into the playoffs. I really don't think the line could have been big enough. It probably could have been 20, and people still would have taken the Saints.
Spence, actually that first drive in the Wildcat had Phillip Lindsay under center, and it looked kind of promising and then kind of stalled once it got past midfield. But, yeah, unfortunate for the Broncos. I'm sure they're not very happy about how that took place. So we'll give us in the records this week, I believe the Believer will sit at 6-6 this week, and Spencer the Wiz with 4 wins and 8 losses, I believe, Spence. So we'll try to get back in the win column. What do you think? I'm seeing 10.5 Steelers tomorrow against the Ravens. You think they cover that number?
I'm going to say they do. I've seen what unprepared teams can go into the football games, and I bet you they had a game plan originally. You got to scrap it because of the COVID test, and then you get players back. That's a new game plan, and then you close down your practice facility. But again, this is a divisional opponent, so weird things can happen. I'm just going to ride the wave with the Steelers, though, and say they are able to contain the Ravens offensively. They really don't have any talent on the outside receiver-wise, so.
That's true. Spence, hey, we're 12 weeks in the NFL season. Let's talk a little playoffs. We'll start in the AFC. The Buffalo Bills have a 1-game lead in the AFC East with an 8-3 record. The Dolphins right behind them at 7-4. The Patriots in third place at 5-6, sniffing the playoffs. The AFC West has the Chiefs at 10-1, Raiders at 6-5. AFC North has the Steelers at a perfect 10-0, the Browns behind them at 8-3, and the Ravens at 6-4. AFC South has the Titans 8-3, the Colts 7-4. So Spence, with there now being 3 wildcard spots, the Dolphins would own one of those wildcard spots, the Browns the other, and the Colts the third. So the teams on the outside looking in, the Ravens 6-4, the Raiders 6-5, and the Patriots 5-6. So like we talked about from the AFC, some teams still sniffing around and having a lot to play for here at the ending point, the final lap of the NFL season.
Yeah, I don't expect the Raiders to be in it at all. The Ravens will probably gain a little bit of momentum at the end of the season, so they are going to be challenging the Colts. Maybe Miami falls out. I could definitely see that. But I don't see 2 of these teams, the Browns, the Miami Dolphins, and the Colts. I don't see 2 of them dropping out, so it's really one more team that's going to fall out, and one more team's going to be able to take that place. The Patriots, to me, are out of it. They're just too inconsistent. They don't look that great week to week. And if you're at a 5-6, you basically have to go undefeated for them to make the playoffs at the end of the season here, and also hope things go out for you. So that's kind of wrapped up for me in terms of the NFC and the wild card spot. Wow, it's just you really don't know what you're going to get out of these teams week to week. The Rams probably are going to make the playoffs. I guess the Buccaneers are kind of going to make the playoffs. But there's no competition leading up to it. And Minnesota's just hanging around, and maybe they could steal that spot from the Cardinals, who we know are capable of losing any given game.
Well, the Vikings have a chance to take on the Jaguars here this coming Sunday. They play Tampa Bay, they play New Orleans, and they finish up with the Lions and the Bears. So they'll play a couple tough teams there. If they handle business against Jacksonville, we'll see what they can do against Tampa Bay. If they can knock off Tampa Bay, that's taking a full game on them, and that'll be an interesting spot to follow. They still think they're alive, especially with the Cardinals dropping that game. Spence, one last note on the AFC wildcard spot. If the Ravens want to make a move at 6-4, this is a game they kind of have to win tomorrow against the Steelers. If not, they fall to 6-5. That puts them a full game behind the Dolphins and Colts and 2 full games behind the Browns with 5 to play. So it's going to be kind of a tough sled for the Ravens to finish up the season. You mentioned the NFC, Spence. The Cardinals had a big loss. The Rams 7-4, but the Rams, they could easily go on a losing streak, as inconsistent as they are, and with that division being as tough as it is, Spence. I think they still have to play the Seahawks in another divisional matchup. So, a couple of these teams will be losing games. The Vikings will be hoping to gain ground, and the Buccaneers, they've showed their inconsistency. So it's going to be fun with that extra wild card spot to kind of see how that shapes up, Spence the Wiz. Let's get into some brief college basketball action, Spence. Here locally, UNLV, they've gotten off to an 0-3 start. The football team has yet to win a game. UNLV athletics, not very good right now here in the Vegas Valley, Spence. What are your thoughts quickly on UNLV and then college basketball as a whole?
College basketball I knew was going to be a hot mess, and it is with all the COVID stuff. It's just natural. It's going to happen. These kids are going around campus. Talked about that. But when it comes to UNLV, this is the lowest level I've ever seen UNLV play in my college experience, and from what I can understand, the past decade. Marcus Arroyo, I don't know how to feel about him, but I want to say this because I was at his post-game conference for the last time. They played Wyoming and absolutely dominated. Charles Williams sat next to him, and he said, "I'm the best running back in the Mountain West." Now, yes, Charles Williams did say that, but I actually put that on Marcus Arroyo. You can't let your guys go around in the locker room talking cocky like that when, first of all, you haven't had a 100-yard running game this season. You didn't have that many last season either. So when guys have egos in your locker room and you're allowing that to float around, you should have a major problem with that. You go into the second half of every game, you have multiple turnovers. I really do think if you go down every single game and you look, they have at least 2 turnovers in the second half and they look worse. I don't expect him to win any games this season. That wasn't my expectations going in. But you want to see improvement out of your team at least. You want to see something that gives you hope for the next season. Nothing of that of the sorts. You got to pray that he brings in the quarterback that he wants. Max Gillum obviously will not be with the team next year. They put in the 4th-string quarterback. He looked okay. He's a true freshman. He's playing high school ball last year, but he was also playing against 4th-string people at Wyoming, mind you. These aren't 4th-string people at Alabama, but he did lead them to 1 touchdown. But I don't know. There's something going on in the locker room, and Marcus Arroyo refuses to go on any radio shows to talk about anything. So we don't know what's going on, but you got a kid like Magyar, who is the 4th-string running back for the UNLV Rebels. He can't catch the field unless it's a blowout against Wyoming. And of course, when he goes in, he looks good because he's the 2nd best running back on the team. Talking about UNLV basketball, they get embarrassed by 22. They get embarrassed by over 20 points twice, back-to-back days on ESPN. I don't know what to make of this team. David Jenkins is one of the worst transfers I've ever seen in my life. This kid doesn't look like he should be starting in Division I basketball. I don't know how he regresses that far. Mbake Jong can't set a screen. He can't protect the paint. He's a liability on offense. And then you bring in a guy like Caleb Grill, who wasn't supposed to play because he wasn't that good last year. Suddenly he thinks he's Kevin Durant. He's doing backup fadeaway threes. And then you got, again, Mitchell Long last year should have been starting, and it's happening once again this year. The one thing I said he needs to improve upon, he is not doing at all. And that is you have a talented player on your bench, and you're not going to play him all season until it's too late. And that is Nick Blake. He had 14 minutes in this game, and I believe he had 13 minutes in the last game. On a team with no talent, how is someone as good as him, as good of a shooter as him, buried on the bench? You're going to tell me defensively? Okay, well, you're playing Caleb Grill the majority of the game, and this guy can't guard anybody. We have the worst perimeter defense in all of college basketball, and I bet you we score the least amount of points in the paint per game. As a student, I can just tell you it's disappointing. I know none of my other friends or students care at all. I do, and unfortunately, it hurts me to know that I never and once in my life got the college experience of being excited about my team playing a game.
Spence, college athletics already taking an enormous hit with COVID-19, not having people in the stands and in the stadiums. For UNLV athletics to have such a horrid start in a really unique season is not good at all. Because when they do allow fans back, people aren't going to want to show up to a team that has one or no wins. And I'm not really sure. I haven't really kept my ear to the wavelength of Arroyo and him not doing radio stuff. I think he has a coach's show here in town. I don't know. I think he's had that commitment. I don't know if he's followed through with it or not. But look, you can only blame not having your players for so long. I've said it before. You're still a football coach, and you still got to put a competitive product on the field. You have football players dressing up in your locker room. So I don't want to hear that you don't have your players. I just don't know if this guy is going to be the guy that changes the program around. Definitely there should be somebody that can be brought into that position with the new facilities and the new opportunities for recruiting here in the Vegas Valley with Allegiant Stadium. This definitely is going to be the year, so we're going to have to look to next year. Hopefully there'll be people in the stands. But that's Spencer the Wiz. Follow him on Twitter at Spencer the Wiz. Spence, tell the listeners here in the chat and on twitch.tv all the other stuff you're doing here locally in town and your radio show on Friday nights here in Las Vegas.
Yeah, so I am your late night talk show, sports talk show on KSHP 1400 AM. Just delivering sports. I talk a little bit of UFC. Whatever's going on during the week, I'll usually talk about it, whatever I've seen. It's really fun. I had my dad on last week, which was really unique. And then you can catch me on Blue Milk Boys or Blue Milk Boys Gaming. If you like Blue Milk Boys, it's the perfect companion podcast for The Mandalorian. We're recording again soon. We're a little behind. But if you like trading card games or old movies and stuff like that, you can catch me on Blue Milk Boys Gaming. And then if you need to contact me or talk about something, you can just catch me on at Spencer the Wiz on Twitter. It's kind of where I'm bringing all my brands to, is that Twitter page.
There you go. And you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at Brad the Believer. If you missed any part of the show live, you can see the podcast version on Apple, Spotify, Audio Boom. All you have to do is search Landry Football Conference Call or go to LandryFootball.com and search the Rest Stop. Will be underneath there. On your way home from work, on your way to work, before bed, when you wake up, listen to our podcast, The Rest Stop. We are live on www.twitch.tv/Chris Landry Football every Tuesday and Thursday, 9 o'clock Pacific time. Also on my Twitter at Brad the Believer or my Facebook page. And then also we repost the live show on my on my YouTube channel, Brad the Believer. And we're going to try to add some more content to that channel here in 2021. So make sure you subscribe there. You like there. Appreciate everybody joining the chat tonight. Victor, thanks for jumping in. Dave Perry, thanks for jumping in also. We'll be back on Thursday with another show for you live, 9 o'clock Pacific time. This is December 1st, 2020. Everybody enjoy the rest of 2020. We'll be back on Thursday for Spencer the Wiz on Brad the Believer. Have a great night. We'll see you back.